had some contacts with Bob in the 1980s and 90s. And in a second I'll just read out something really that I've written about that. But let me just tell you a few things about him. Obviously a very significant poet in terms of sound poetry in Britain. One of a number of very important European sound poets of the 60s and 70s, really, people like Ernst Jandl and Henri Chopin. Bob was born in July 1920, died September 2002. Grew up in Enfield, was part of the Plymouth Brethren, which is rather interesting. Worked as a teacher early on, conscientious objector during the Second World War. Began his Writers' Forum in 1963, which is both a poetry workshop and actually a publishing outfit, if you like, which continues to the present day, I think. Published his ABC and Sound in 1964, which was recorded by the BBC in 66 and 68, and is probably the classic work associated with him. Later on he went on to manage Better Books bookshop in London, part of the London Underground. By the mid-1970s he was involved in the Poetry Society and the various disputes at the time over a more traditional versus kind of experimental ethos in British poetry. And then I think until the end of his life, Bob was a highly prolific writer and performer, very highly respected, worked with a whole range of people, Lawrence Upton, Bill Griffiths, Bird Yak, Hugh Metcalfe, and various other people. So that was a very quick biography. That's the official side of it all. Let me just reminisce a bit now, because I just wanted to sort of evoke him. And then I might just end up with reading one or two things. And it's just a very personal sort of reminiscence. In the early 80s, like a lot of young poets, I guess, in Britain, I was involved in the sort of poetry scene in London a bit, and the cabaret scene partly. Very difficult to kind of work out what that was about in some ways. Involved places like Apples and Snakes, out of which several sort of performance poets emerged. I suppose Benjamin Zephaniah became one of the most famous ones amongst those. But it was kind of difficult, to connect up at that time with some of the people that one really admired, I think, who'd already were performing less at that time. People like Tom Pickard, I was very influenced by, Basil Bunting, and people like that. Late 1984, I moved to London. I went to see Bob at the Sussex Pub, which is a place that he often went performed at the time in Islington, Sussex, where he did a nostalgia performance at that time. So we're looking at 1984, it was already nostalgia, of the ABC of Sound and various other things. And I realised he was someone pretty amazing. I hadn't really heard his work before, at least not live. So I invited him to do various gigs. I was involved in setting things up. We did one at a pub in Camden, which had about an audience of about 5 people, right? So this is a big audience compared to the sort of audience Bob Cobbing might regularly get at that time. It's kind of interesting. Certainly, one didn't expect that many more. We did on other occasions have many more. But, so it didn't seem that auspicious, but of course his performance was remarkable. And we did it on that occasion, I think, fairly sort of interpretations of Dada poems such as Hugo Ball. If I get a chance, I might do a Hugo Ball at the end. It's great to pay homage to things like that. We did several things. There was a reading at Apples and Snakes in London, at Farringdon, where we just growled and snarled and roared from one of his visual scripts. The script was this one. I've got it somewhere. Hang on, I'll get it. Right. And this is the other side of his activity, of course, the use of the photocopier, all right, to blur the distinction, as it were, between, kind of visual and verbal activity, right? I'm not going to talk about that theoretically, but of course it's very, very interesting, especially if you link it all up with the Dada tradition and so on. But anyway, this would go something like this. time, I think that one, we did about 20 minutes of it. And this would be Bob on one side and me on the other, and, you know, kind of walking around the space and trying to get acquainted with not only the oral aspect of the thing, but the actual sort of verbal, the kind of location and things like that. This is all very low tech, obviously. This was purely using the kind of voice and one's body and one's kind of performative, you know, kind of persona. After that, I remember performing a beer mat. I remember Bob picking up the beer mat. And there are other stories of him working like this. And we just had to react to that. And that also lasted a long time, actually. I think we were in the mood by then. But there's another story of him on another occasion, at another venue, looking at a, you know, because he was so open to the notion that you can, as it were, produce poetry or sound or utterance from almost any source. Looking at a landscape, a photograph of landscape on the wall and performing that on another occasion. So this was something he did quite often, I think, when he was feeling relaxed anyway. I also remember, this was quite nice, we went invited him to Romford, where I was part of, that time, of a punk outfit, almost, called the Dave Hopkins Orchestra. Nice staid kind of name. I think you got the idea from the Joe Loss Orchestra or something like that. Although it wasn't in the least bit like that, you know. And Bob turned up to do the reading with his wife, Jennifer Pike. He was wearing I remember this bright shirt, a very sort of Hawaii kind of style shirt, very wide lapel American jacket and the sandals, of course. He always wore sandals, usually with bare feet and sandals, all the time. He went on stage in front of about 70 assorted punks and goths, right? A really mean crowd. And I remember thinking, you know, this is a mistake. This is a big mistake to invite him. This is a man of, this is 1985, so he'd be 65 or so, yeah. No, he's older than that, anyway. So he started to sort of jog around and hop around. It wasn't exactly punk style, you know. It's like an old hippie, a hobbit or something, you know, he's a hobbit-like, quite small. Long hair, big white beard, right? Big nose, you know what he looks like. Wonderful. He had a wonderful appearance. And I could hear the booing. I could hear this noise emanating from the audience. And I thought, shit, this is really going on. But after about 5 minutes, I realised, in fact, what he was doing was orchestrating this noise. He was actually, you know, he was telling one lot of the audience to sort of do it louder, you know, get louder. Another part of the audience to keep it. It was astonishing, and they loved it completely, and he completely won over the audience. And it was an object lesson in improvisation, because, you know, it was, in a sense, the circumstances were completely unpromising. He had to be, of course, he needed to be very brave to do this, but he was just listening. He was just aware of sound. He was aware of, you know, the medium that he was concerned with as a sound poet, and all he wanted was to get something interesting happening, and he orchestrated them beautifully. He was totally open. There's never any money involved, of course. Never is. The last gig we did was at the Morden Tower. This was in December 1992. The rapport was quite instinctive by this time. We performed Hugo Ball. We chanted my stuff and his stuff. We scrambled stuff. We ended up with the entire audience chanting and singing gloriously. It was affirmative, uninhibited, unshackled, unself-conscious, celebratory. Those are all the things that I think he was great at, and he was a wonderful poet in that way. I won't say a lot more. I think you know, it's worth looking at his work. I think it would be nice to keep his memory alive. I think it's a matter of forgetting about aesthetics or poetry with Bob, or who influenced who, although of course he's now very famous. I think his secret was, like the Dadas, he knew how to live. He had a certain attitude to life. And I think in a way that came over with when we performed the beer mat and things like that. It was great, it was very good. It was a very open, interesting attitude. I'm going to read one or two things by him. These aren't necessarily sound poems, but they give you some sense of, well, they are sound poems of a kind, of what his work was like. I'm not trying to imitate him, by the way, which would be virtually impossible. Bob, bobbin, bow tree, boffin, brain box, breadhead, bog roll, baritone, colander, conman, croupier, call girl, crooner, crabtree, codpiece, cobbing, baritone, bog roll, breadhead, brain box, boffin, bow tree, bobbin, bob, colander, conman, croupier, call girl, crooner, crab apple, codpiece, cobbing, cobbing, codpiece, crab apple, breadhead, bog roll, baritone, boffin, bow tree, bobbin, bob. One piece. We could go on a lot longer with that, but these pieces are always great. Basil, Bannet, Bay, Beebarn, Bergamot, Bettany, Borage, Burnet, Brambling, Barn Owl, Brant, Bullfinch, Buzzard, Bunting, Bittern, Bean Goose. Bunting, Bittern, Buzzard, Bullfinch, Bergamot, Bay, Basil, Bannet, Baybarn, Bettany, Burnet, Borage, Brambling, Barn Owl. Lots of those kind of pieces that I used to do. This one's maybe. This is from the ABC of Sound. I'll just have a go at this one. I don't want to overdo my time slot. How long have I got? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I said 20 minutes. Perfectly bang on time, you know. I mean, this one looks like this. I'll try it. I mean, grin, 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 grim. Gay, green, grey, green, gangrene. Ganglia, grin, 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 grin. East Ender, Extender, East India, Indera, East Wind, be twinned, be syndicate, sanity, twixt and betweenity, first name, first dame, furtive, flirtations, Eurasian, Asian, Udanti, bevel. Bigeminal, seminal, betulin, betterment. Be tumbled, lumbered, cumbered, custard. Crisis, cripple, crisscross, cribble, cranium, crinoid, crinkle, crankle, crinkum, chasm, cataclysm, cataclysm, biblioclasm, biblioclast, biblioclept, biblioclast, biblioclept, bibliocleptomania, bibliophagy, bibliophagist, bibliophagistical, bibliomaniac, bibliomaniac, bibble, babble, bibbatry. Bigeminal, seminal, betterment, bafflement, East Ender, Extender, East India, Hinderer, East Wind, East Twin, Syndicate, Sanity, Flirtatious, Eurasian, Asian, Devil, the Devil. And maybe just to finish up, I'll do this one. This is one that you all know, of course, a classic of early sound poetry. Gaji, Berry, Bimba, Glandrini, Lowly, Loni, Kadori, Gajama, Grama, Berida, Bimbala, Glandri, Galasasa, Lola, Tolomini, Gaji, Berry, Bin, Blasa, Glasala, Loli, Loni, Cadorso, Sasala, Bim, Gajama, Tufum, Izim, Zala, Bimban, Woolly Mani, Benny, Berry, Ban, oh, Catalomanang, Rhinocerosola, Hapsaman, Lola, Tolomini, who? Gajama, Rhinocerosola, Hapsaman, Bluku, Terulala, Blalala, Lu. Zim, Urla, Zim, Urla, Zim, Zanzibar, Zanzala, Zam, Elephantolim, Brusala, Buloman, Brusala, Buloman, Trumptata, Velo da bang bang afolo perzamai langado tor gajama bimbalo glandridi glassala zingtata bimbalo violo laxato violo zimbrabim violo uli puluju malu Tuffum im zimbrabim negramai bombalo negramai bombalo tuffum izim gajama bimbalo bere gajama gagadi gajama afolo pinks gaga di bombalo bombalo gajama and gago di bling bong gago blunk